Hello, everybody. Welcome. That number is coming up. If you are joining us today, feel free to type into the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. Welcome all. Brooklyn, Orcas Island, Oakland, Holden, Massachusetts, Portland. Hello from Seattle, Lake Forest Park, Shoreline. Hi, everyone. Oh, we've got someone from Viña del Mar, Chile, Houston, Virginia, San Francisco, Boston. Hi, everybody. Teaneck, New Jersey. Well, welcome all. My name is Meghna. I work here in Seattle at Larder, a community cookbook store. We are so excited to host Pilar Hernandez and Eileen Smith to talk about their new cookbook, the Chilean Kitchen. I actually just found out today from Pilar that we are probably some of the only folks that have signed copies. So if you're interested in buying, definitely check our website out, booklarder.com. We are going to get started here in a few minutes. I'm just going to give folks a little bit more time to trickle in. But we are going to have a about 45-minute conversation between Pilar and Eileen. We will move into a Q&A session at the end, but also feel free to ask questions in the Q&A function here at the bottom of your screen. So that we can get your questions answered throughout the evening. We'll get to as many as we can, and that'll be that. I guess we will get started. I'm going to turn it over to Pilar and Eileen. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thanks, Meghna.
Thanks, guys.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Eileen Smith, this one. I am speaking to you from my office in Santiago, Chile, because as you probably know, Pilar and I, seen without meaning to, sort of did a little switcheroo in that I am from the US and I live in Santiago, Chile, and she'll tell you about herself in a minute. I'm primarily a writer. I write about food, and I write about nostalgia, and I write about culture and belonging and place. And I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in a family that really appreciated food from all over the world. And life brought me to Chile in about 2004. And Pilar approached me about 2 years ago to write this book. I'll talk about how we met a little bit later. But that's how it all started, was because it was Pilar's brainchild. So I'll turn it over to her to talk a little bit about herself.
Hello. Thank you for joining us today. And we're so excited to be at Larder, and a community cookbook bookstore is like so exciting. And I wish to travel someday and go there and get to meet everyone in person, because all this Zooming is getting a little tiresome. So my name is Pilar Hernandez. I am the recipe developer of the Chilean Kitchen. I grew up in Chile. I grew up in a small town, like 60 miles south of the capital of the country, is what is considered like the main production place. All the veggies and fruits are grown around the town I was born and raised. And then I spent 10 years in Santiago when I was going to college, and then moved to Houston. And I have been living here in Houston for 17 years. And the funny thing is that I learned how to cook Chilean food here in Houston, because growing up, I grew up in a family, my grandmother and mother, they were all excellent Chilean cooks, but it was never a priority for me growing up to learn how to do the traditional dishes. And I always was more, I still like sweets more. So I was very like helpful when it came to do cookies and stuff like that. But for the like everyday lunch, I was not the helping hand. So when I moved to Houston, we realized my husband is also from Chile, and we realized there is almost no Chilean community here, and there is no Chilean restaurant. And after a while, we started missing our food. And I started calling back to my mom and my aunt and asking how to do our traditional dishes. And then I will go to the supermarket and try to match whatever ingredient to what I could see, and then go back home, test everything. And that's how my food blog was born. And initially it was En Mi Cocina Hoy, and it's been 12 years that I have been developing recipes for that food blog. And really everything has been leading to this point of producing this book, and getting all the feedback all these years from so many people that they wanted to know more about Chilean cuisine and they wanted to have a book. So it's really exciting that this year we have the book.
I also wanted to say thank you to Book Larder for having us. And in the back of our minds, when all of this wasn't really happening, what's happening now wasn't happening yet, we thought that maybe we would divide and conquer. Maybe Pilar would do some events around her, and then I was going to go to Seattle because I have a lot of friends there. Hi, friends in Seattle. And we sort of thought about different ways we could do it, if the two of us could go together, if we could go separately, how we would do our book tour. But little did we know that that was going to be well out of our hands. But the fact that we're meeting you on Zoom is actually, in a way, kind of serendipitous, because Pilar and I, little known fact, unless you've read the book very carefully, actually wrote this entire book online. We met online. I interviewed her for a story for NPR about the marraqueta, which is a typical kind of bread that we eat. It's similar to a French bread roll, kind of. And I interviewed her because I had seen her blog and I had seen her work, her body of work on Chilean food. And I thought, well, she really knows. And the other thing is that although I speak Spanish, it's easier for me if I'm writing a story in English to interview someone in English, because then I don't have to worry about getting their words exactly right. And so we became friends through that. And then we wrote a cookbook completely online. We never met, we never saw each other, we never had a cup of coffee or tea or any of Pilar's delicious kuchen. We just did it online. Which was kind of crazy. And we did not tell our agent. We just said, here's our book proposal. Here we are, two people. We would like to write this cookbook. And they said, great. So that's funny. Pilar, we have a question for you, which is, I have answered in the chat, but not in the Q&A. Where are you from? What is the town?
Oh, so the city where I grew up, I'm from Rancagua. So if you know anything about Rancagua, I was not born there. I was born in Coya, and that's in the Andes mountain, because Rancagua is a miner town, and the mine is a copper mine. It's the biggest underground copper mine in the world. And they have the whole setup with a hospital and everything in the mountain, and I was born in that hospital. That's it's not like nowadays it have moved, all the operations have moved to Rancagua, and it's where I grew up. But yes, this town almost is very small now. Where I was born, Coya is a few thousand, and Rancagua is around 100,000 people lives there. So also a small town.
So I don't know how much people know about the geography of Chile. You've probably noticed that it's a very long, skinny country. And so one of the things that means is that there's not a lot of movement of produce within Chile. So the products that we eat, we tend to eat very locally. And the cookbook is based really around where Pilar grew up, which was Rancagua, and also, Pilar?
So the other big influence but for me growing up is that my grandparents have they bought us like a place without a house or anything, but then they built a beach house in Lipimávida, and that's really 100 people lives there, and it still is super, super small. This is in the Maule, in the region. Is close to Rancagua. At that time, it was 4 hours in driving. Now maybe you can do it in a little less because the roads are better, but it's a beautiful place. And if you ever have the opportunity to go, the whole Chile can be explored in so many different ways, because if you go to the Central Valley, you get you get so many different experiences, but then you can do exactly the same on the coast and have totally different experience, because we have the Central Valley is called the Central Valley because there is mountains in both sides. So in one side you have the Andes mountain that is really huge, and it's not easy to go one side and the other, and it divides our country, Chile, from Argentina. But we have this other mountain that is the coastal, and it's in between the Pacific Ocean, the beach, and then it's the mountain, and then you get the Central Valley. So really there is so many different weather situations and climes, and the fruits and veggies that you can grow, they're all different, and the soil change. And you can see now they're trying to explore that on the wines and bringing all that different flavors. So Chile is a very fun country to explore, because without traveling so far away, you can experience different weathers and different cultures, because if the weather change, the fruits and the veggies change, and that make the food change. So it's a really fun place.
So one of the things that we had to unfortunately do when we were writing the cookbook was to limit the scope of the book, because Pilar has hundreds and hundreds of recipes, many of them traditional, on her blog, which is called, well, I don't know which blog you want to talk about, the English or the Spanish one. She has two. There's Chilean Food and Garden, and then there's En Mi Cocina Hoy. So we had to limit it, and what we decided to do was really, for the most part, stick to the central region of Chile. So what is available in the Central Valley and what is commonly eaten there, and also on the coast. One thing we noticed when we were writing the cookbook, and I do see your question, sorry, I don't see your question, from Sandra. One thing we noticed when we were writing the cookbook is, so we worked with this amazing photographer called Araceli Paz. If she's not world famous, she should be. She's amazing, also Chilean. And we took the photos, obviously. So I didn't tell the story. We all met in Houston. I met Pilar's husband in the airport. He said, "Are you Eileen?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I will take you now." And then I just went to Pilar's house where I'd never been before. And then I stayed there for 10 days, like you do. And Araceli was there as well. And so every day we had this really regimented, all of you who know me that I was not in charge of that, way of setting up the meals and cooking, and Pilar cooked everything, and Araceli photographed everything, and sometimes I could grate carrots and also hold reflectors. And we noticed so many not repeated ingredients, but like that so many of the ingredients were so simple. And I think the one that called out to me the most, that we saw the most, was like this kind of orangey palette, because there's so much squash eaten in Chile. And then we talked about how that's really a central Chilean thing. Like in the South, you might not get as much squash, like for example, with the sopapillas, which are fried. In the central area, the dough has squash in it, and then in other areas they don't. But a question that Sandra has, she wants to know how long it took to write the book, which we can both talk about. But she wants to know if the recipes are traditional or do they have a personal family touch? Like, are they specific to the Hernandez family? What would you say about that, Pilar?
Okay, so I grew up in the Silva family.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So I grew up with my mother's family, and in Chile we use both last names. So you carry by definition your father's last name, and you don't get a say. But I grew up in my mother's family side, so my family is Silva. But no, the recipes are traditional. They don't have a special touch from my family. Precisely because this book, more than being about myself, I wanted to be about traditional Chilean food, because that's something that is very unknown here in the United States still. So my focus was that. I didn't want to prioritize my experience. I want this book to be for anyone who have been to Chile or who have like first generation immigrants here, that they could see the recipes and see the reflections of the traditional Chilean cuisine. So, and also with the blog, I have had many years to really get the recipes to a general consensus. Because when I started the blog, I was cooking my family recipes because, as I said, I was calling my mom, my aunt. My grandmother passed away just after I moved here. So most of the recipes come from just one generation, my mom and my aunt. But I will call and they will tell me the family recipe. But then sometimes I will publish the family recipe in the blog, and people will write to me like, oh, you know what? We never put that. And this happened a lot with potatoes. So we have had to come to the conclusion that my family loves potatoes because they have put potatoes on everything. And then people from Chile will write to me and like, you know what? That's exactly like my mom's, but we never put potatoes on it. And then I will call my mom and say, oh, Mom, are you sure? And she will be, oh, no. We always put potatoes because they're so delicious. Like, why not? So through the years, I have, even the blog at this point is more about traditional recipes than what my family prefers. And I always say, in your kitchen, do whatever you want. But I did wanted the book to be more like a place that everyone will see themselves and not something that it was about my family.
So Shelley asked the question, how we decided to organize the cookbook by seasons. I think we just came up with it and it just like snapped into place. We were like, this, because the food is so seasonal. And we thought, like how do we shop? How do we cook? And we thought, well, we go to the feria, so the farmer's market, and we see what's there. And then we decide. You don't make a list. I mean, you can make a list because you know it's in season because you were there last week. But we don't start out with this idea of, I'm going to go and I'm going to buy, like right now, for example, it's sort of spring and summer. And I'm not going to be like, oh, actually, this came up for Thanksgiving. People were saying, Eileen, something Brussels sprouts. And I was like, no, it's the wrong season. We cook in season, always. And so I think that was a pretty easy, I don't know who came up with it, but it was pretty easily decided. Do you think, Pilar?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's funny because the feria, the farmer's market is still pretty much a thing in Chile. If you can manage to have the time to go, you will go because it's so much fun and the fruit and veggies are so much better than the supermarket. So it's really worth the trip. And usually even the sellers there, they will be telling you like, take the strawberries for your your wine or for this dessert, or they will suggest what you're gonna be. So Chilean culture in that sense is really funny because there is a bunch of dishes that we eat at the same time all the time. Like it will be very weird to go to a house and have porotos con rienda, that is a very wintry soup in summer. Like if you go to a Chilean house and they give you that in summer, you will be very suspicious, like something fishy is going on in here. Is at that point, like really people cook the same dishes at the same time because it still is so ingrained that we eat what is being harvested. But we're lucky because we have such a variety and a quality of fruit and veggies that is really no reason to be picky around.
I'm going to skip over you for a second, Marlene. Please be patient, but I'll come. Oh, it went away. Rosie Gallardo or Gallardo, I'm not sure, says being Chilean, so maybe Rosie Gallardo. She says she's tried several of the recipes and she belongs to the weekly menu. You should all sign up. She wants to know, this is the question that they always ask and we always demur because we don't want to answer, which is, what is your favorite recipe, Pilar?
So my favorite recipe from the book is the pastel de choclo. I love pastel de choclo. I will eat pastel de choclo like every month. I will be fine with that. But really, I feel like, and that's my favorite, but the most traditional, the one that I feel we struggle more is like, what is the most traditional Chilean food? If someone asks me that, I feel like there is so many ways to look at that question, because if you look at what is the oldest dish that we still cook and is on the book, it will be the charquicán. That it really comes pre-Spaniard, pre-colonization, and it have changed so little. There is good records that is always being part of the diet. So that will be for me the most traditional in that sense, but the most consumed is the empanada de pino. Empanada de pino in Santiago, and this is not a thing in Rancagua, but Santiago being the capital and where almost half the population live, or a third of the population live, it really weighs on traditions. And in Santiago, many people every Sunday have empanadas de pino. It's like a given. So they're very like popular. So, and for sweet, I feel like it's a little easier, and torta de milhoja will be like my favorite. I love it. And it's one of these recipes that every family do it in a particular way and have their own rules and traditions around, but I have never tried one that I don't like.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of the cookbook, which kind of ties into Marlene or Marlena's question about what the biggest challenge was when writing the book. So I mentioned that we worked together, we wrote a proposal, we got an agent, she sold the proposal, and then it was like, okay, now you have to hurry up and write. So we decided that we were going to organize it, as you know, by seasons. And I wrote an essay, of course, with lots of input from Pilar. There's an introductory essay and of course our acknowledgements and all those things. And then there's a seasonal essay, and then each one of the recipes has an essay that goes with it. And so many of you may already have the cookbook. If you don't, get it at Book Larder. They have signed book plates. For each one, there was something linguistic or cultural or historical about the recipe that really stood out to us that we wanted to talk about. But when we were actually doing the cookbook, and I think the biggest challenge it depends on which one of us you ask. For me, it was probably 10 days of nonstop, 24-hour-a-day people contact and food talking. It was beautiful, but it was also like, it's really different from my day-to-day. So every night we would cook, Pilar would wake up, everyone would wake up about 6, and then Pilar would start cooking probably by 6:30 or 7. cook all day, cook and shoot and cook and shoot and cook and shoot, break for lunch, cook and shoot. And then over dinner, or once, which is another one of the seasonal, not seasonal moments, we would talk about the stories of each of the recipes. We would talk about what, we already had a basic idea of what we were going to talk about each one, but we wanted to make sure, you know, that we were telling a story that would be interesting and captivating to people. And it was super interesting to me to hear, because Araceli is also Chilean, to hear her say a few things that were different or the same as stuff with Pilar. But when I saw Pilar making the desserts, and you guys, I really need your help with this. When I saw how excited she was about all the desserts, particularly the mil hojas, which is like a little bit fussy if you've never done it before. It has a lot of steps. You have to be really organized. I saw, oh, this is what she needs to do. She really needs to write a dessert cookbook. So we're going to need your help making sure that that all happens. What would you say was the most challenging thing for you, Pilar, about the cookbook?
For me, the worst is that I couldn't go to Chile as much as I will have liked to prepare for the book. Like I really wanted to take like one trip when we were deep in the book, but I couldn't because visa situations, immigration situations, political situations. So it was not so for me that I really, in my mind, because this been a dream of mine for a long time. Like for the last 5 years, I have been thinking I want to do this book. So when we finally were like doing the book, I always imagine I will go to Chile and have this, like, just, I know what I'm eating, but I just like being there and I miss being there. So for me, that was why it didn't happen, but everything else, it was pretty smooth, and I felt, I tried to enjoy it as much as possible because I have been thinking and dreaming about this for so long. So I was very, very in the moment, and leading up to the 10 days of the cooking and shooting, I was a little scared that I will never wanted to cook again. But it didn't happen. I'm just fine. I'm still cooking and I'm happy. And the other thing that I was like very excited, and I'm still cannot believe it, is that the whole book was born in my house. So everything that you see, all the plates, everything came from my kitchen. So it's like a wonderful memory that I get to relive every day.
And I think one of the things that was not challenging that you might think would be to bring two people together that had never met before and have them work on a project together. Like, I could not have picked a better co-author. We have a very similar working style. We're both super applied. We're very regimented about getting things done, about delivering work when we say we're going to deliver it. Like, really, the word that I would use in Chile is, I would say consecuente. Like, we cross our T's, we dot our I's, we do what we're supposed to. And that was really important to us. If any of you were planning on pitching a book, that was really important to us to transmit to our agent, so that they would want to work with us. Like, look, like we behave well. See us, we do the thing we're supposed to do. Jacqueline wants to know, will the book be available in Spanish?
Okay.
Well,
we can explain how this works. So when you sign a contract with a publisher, they get the rights for 5 years usually, and if someone wants to publish the same book in Spanish, it will need to be translated. They will need to buy the rights from Skyhorse, that is our publisher. So I don't know. Do you know anyone who works in a big publishing house in Chile? Tell them you want the book. These things happen, but when people push for them, I will be very happy to have the book in Spanish. So
I would too, but I'm really worried about the translations of the stories. So I work also as a translator, as I'm a writer and a translator, and Seeing my own work translated worries me unbelievably. I know Pilar's not as worried about that. She's more worried about the recipes coming out right. But I'm like, well, what is it going to sound like? I mean, one of the things that's so, I think, unique about this cookbook, and a number of people have told me that they've sat down and read the book, which I was like, yeah, I mean, sure, why not? You can learn a lot about Chile that way. And I think that's pretty unusual. I don't know, one of the things that makes it so great for non-Chileans is that it gives a lot of context for things. Like, for example, there's a moment when we talk about wheat, and we talk about this wheat threshing festival that happens at a certain time of year, like to explain when wheat is important and why wheat is important. And if you're Chilean, I think you know that information, but it may not be top of mind. And so you might not think to write a story about it. So I don't know what it would be like for Chileans to read those particular stories, but hopefully we'll get to find out. Oscar would like to know how many recipes have direct connections to Mapuche culture. For those of you that don't know, the Mapuche are an indigenous people that live mainly in the south of Chile and Argentina. And there is heavy Mapuche influence in a lot of Chilean culture and also in the food. I don't know that we have sat down to look at this particular issue. Do you, Pilar?
I will say top of my mind, not, so there is 75 recipes, I will say around 10 you can find like clear connections, because we have the zapallo con mote, that's squash with berries, and that's a Mapuche influence. But since it have wheat, it's post Spaniard colonization, so I will say like traces of Mapuche influences, and maybe in 10, but there's not that many, because really I wouldn't say that in Rancagua we have a huge influence of Mapuche. It's more going more south in the country. So,
and a lot of what we know about Mapuche cooking involves ingredients that are not that easy to find in the United States. Like, they make a lot of flour out of this kind of pine nut that comes from the monkey puzzle tree. It's not like the same kind of oily Italian pine nut. It's starchy, it's much more like a chestnut. And they make a lot of food with that, but that's not something we can ask people in the United States to source. It's even difficult for us to source it here in Santiago, for example. So we probably can't make that many. There were some limitations in that way. Not really limitations. There weren't a lot of things we would have put in the book that we, quote, couldn't, but we had to make adaptations. And speaking of adaptations, we have a question about pastel de choclo and what you, Pilar, would recommend as a vegetarian replacement, or how would you make a vegetarian pastel de choclo? This is a question from Soledad.
So it depends. Like in winter, what I do is I use lentils and mushrooms to make the pino, to replace the meat and onion part. So I still do the sauté the onions, and then I add the mushrooms, like cut it small, and then lentils. The lentils, you need to cook them by themselves before. And you season the same way. And in summer, I use eggplant, that it goes really, really well. I really like it when you do it with eggplant, and you just, so try the eggplant when it's raw to make sure that it's not bitter, but I usually, if they're fresh, they should be fine, and cut it really small, and then saute with the onion and use that as the base. It's delicious. And I want to say something else about the Mapuche thing, that really I didn't grow up in a family that I will consider. So Chilenos, we are all mestizos. We have, and I have my DNA, so I can tell you I'm 50-50. But really my family was not, we didn't have any connections, or we were not consider ourselves part of the culture. So I wouldn't cook or claim any of that. I feel like I don't have the knowledge, and I don't feel like I will be the right person.
And in the book, we do mention merken, which is a smoked spice made of a certain kind of pepper that people in English translate to goat's horn pepper, which nobody calls it that in English, but I digress. But that comes to us, I think, really more from the pop culture use of merken, that merken is commonly used in many parts of the country as something spicy. It's a little bit, it's not very spicy, it's more smoky. It's not as smoky as chipotle, it's delicious. But you can make anything in the cookbook where we mention merken, you can easily make it with hot paprika or with some other replacement that Pilar has suggested. We have another question about how long it took to write the cookbook. I don't know, 6 months?
So
2 weeks?
Yes.
10 days?
So I think it's a different answer for each of us, because many of the recipes I have already written, like they were like the same recipes that I have been using. So, but to really go through the introductions, and we did many interviews with Eileen, and then she will write, and then we will read it again and see, do we want to maybe research this a little bit more, or sometimes we will go back to friends and family and followers of my blog to ask, how do you remember this? How you experience this? Is something that are still people doing in the country or not? So there were many influences. So I will say for writing 8 months, I will say, but the process is 2 years, because you need to write the proposal, you need to get the agent, then you rewrite the proposal with the advice of the agent, and then it sells to a publisher, then it comes, all the contract is months until you sign the contract, and then you are like in production. So the production time, 8 months.
And we had to chase down a lot of like what might seem like very insignificant details to you. We had to chase down, like Pilar has this great source. She has also a Facebook group that's really active. And so, and also on the blog, like, for example, we sort of paint this image of people drying fruit on the corrugated roofs of the homes in like sort of the Central Coast and places where it's really warm, where you could dry fruit. And so we wondered, well, was it the fruit that we used for mote con huesillo, or was it a different fruit? And then, you know, we had to ask people, and like what kind of, and then also when you ask those questions, you have to do it in a way that's non-suggestive. So you don't want to say to people, do you remember people drying this kind of fruit on the roof? Because they'll remember it in their mind's eye, they'll see it. So we had to be like sneaky about how we did this kind of research. And speaking of mote con huesillo, Oscar wants to know, is mote con huesillo too difficult or involved to make at home? The answer is no. Pilar is going to tell you why.
No, not at all. No, go for it. So if you live in the US, you can find the peaches in Trader Joe's. And yeah, really, you just cook the peaches, and instead of the wheat berries, we use barley, because really I feel like the mouthfeel is a lot more similar to the mote chileno. So yeah, no, it's really easy, and really it's such a good snack. You should do it. Yeah, it's a good one to start, and you get a really good product here. Is worth it.
And speaking of things to start with, that was really serendipitous. Kaylin Hughes would like to know, she's new to Chilean cuisine, and she would like to know, what recipes would you start with? You have to pretend you don't know anything about Chilean food, which is difficult.
I think, like, okay, I can tell you what my friends have been cooking, and I never said, like, so they got the book, and then they sent me pictures, and many people have started with the chickpea soup that it have a lot of flavor. It's really easy, and it's good now that we are like fall winter weather. Another popular one is the broccoli fritters. One that I really like is the salmon cancato. And that's a salmon that you do in the oven with tomato. It sounds super weird, but just do it because it works and it's so delicious. So it's salmon with onions, tomato, and sausage, and it's really, really good. So what else? Oh, another friend did the porotos con rienda, so the bean. That's another good one. I will say that could be a really, really good introduction. You cannot mess it up really, and it have a lot of flavor, and it's like, imagine a cowboy, a Chilean cowboy in the mountains cooking over a fire. That will be a soup. Like it's a very old recipe and very traditional.
So I have kind of a different take on it, which is that everyone that I know made porotos granados first, but I think that's because it's my favorite Chilean food. And so they've heard me talk about it, or they've tasted me make it for them first. And so that's why they did it. Or maybe it's because we wrote that story with so much love. It's hard to say. Kathy Vargas wants to know, what's the possibility of a 2.0, assuming it goes well?
So, as Eileen said, if something comes down the line, I would like to do something on sweets, because I feel like, and I think it wouldn't be just Chilean, it would be like maybe Peruvian and Argentinian too, and Uruguay. Also, we have really, because the sugar came to us with the colonization, with the Spaniard. So our sweet traditions are kind of intertwined, and there is a lot of good stuff, and it's very different. The cakes, the cookies, we have the Kuchen in Chile, that is a German sort of pie. It can be a fruit pie. It can have different versions, and there is a lot of that stuff that really I have not seen good representation here in the US. So I would love to like dig into that more.
I think.
Sorry. No.
Oh, I think I spent like 45 minutes grilling Pilar and Araceli on what all of the family tree of the alfajor is. So alfajores are a sandwich cookie, and we have a few different varieties in Chile that might have manjar, which is what we call dulce de leche, or they might have other things inside. But it turns out that there's way more to know about than I knew about. So can we have a section on just alfajores? Would that be okay? Could we have that? Could you do that?
Yeah, and then you have like the cakes, the alfajor cakes, that they're like 4 different versions. And mil hojas is really another version of an alfajor cake.
Mm-hmm.
So
oh yeah, sure.
There is so much to eat there.
Okay, so I have 2 questions that kind of come together. One of them is, and so I'll ask them both. One is from Tanya, the other one's from Pam. And so the one from Tanya is, what is the thought process about which recipes to include in the book? And then Pam says she knows what typifies Italian food or Mexican food, but what defines Chilean food? And I feel like those 2 questions come together very nicely. Well done, Pam and Tanya.
So Chilean food, you know how many times you hear about the sofrito to talk about Puerto Rican cuisine and Dominican, and so we have our own sofrito, and that will be we use a lot of onion, and it's yellow onion. We use sweet paprika. And you need to think that, so one of the things that many American people don't realize is that Chilean cuisine is not spicy. It's very mild, and the focus is on the veggies, and really the cooking times are not long. Everything is very simple and quick, and you need to start with good ingredients. And the foundational blocks is the onion, the sweet paprika. In winter, we use cumin, but not a lot. It's just a hint. And in summer, we use a lot of oregano, we use basil, but we use always sweet basil, not the anise basils. That's not part of our tradition. So you need to pay attention to that information on the book, because really it happened to me that I made the pastel de choclo with anise basil, and the flavor profile was so different. So it was a little shocking. So, and the same with the oregano. The oregano, you need to use Mexican oregano, because Greek oregano is very different. So the stuff, you can find it here in the US, but you need to be careful on that sort of detail to really get the traditional Chilean flavor. And usually, some people, of course, in Chile like spicy food, but usually that spice come on a sauce. Like you could use Tabasco, or you could use, and it's something that you put on the table and each person will add to the dish. It's not something that is built in on the food. And so yeah.
I want to, if I can, if you don't mind, I'd like to address Pam's question as well. I think that two things that are very typical about Chilean food is that they tend to be very just amenable. Like there's nothing that bites you back. There's nothing very salty, super tangy, very extra crunchy, very loud in your mouth. Like these are foods that are just comfortable to eat. You would always think, oh, I could have a plate of that. That sounds really nice. And the other thing is that there are no mystery ingredients. You will never be surprised when you're eating Chilean food to find out it has a thing in it that you weren't expecting. Like there's nothing hidden. There's no like super complex sauce that takes 14 hours to make that has bone broth in it. Like if you sit down to a table and you see something, if it's traditional Chilean, I mean, people can put whatever they want in your food. You look at it and you're like, aha, I see it has squash. It has beans, it has corn. I know what this is. Like it's all very identifiable, which goes really well with Rosie's question. She wants to know, do you cook Chilean food or food from the US for your children? And she says she does not know their ages.
So in my house, I love food and I love all kind of food. So in my house, it's just whatever we want to eat. So we do cook Chilean food, of course, because many times I'm craving Chilean food, but it's not the only thing I cook, not at all. Like sometimes, and especially now with the pandemic, I have even done banh mi at home with all the ingredients, like the pickles, and because I just miss it so much. So I'm very curious about food and I like the flavors, but so it's like, yeah. And I do a lot of American, like US stuff. We just have Thanksgiving and we did, sweet potato, mashed potato, cornbread, but I only do cornbread for Thanksgiving. So my kids were very excited, like, yay, we get to eat cornbread. Yeah.
But I mean, I think you're really carried by what's in season. For example, there's not a lot of overlap in but when they're transitioning into fall and I'm transitioning to spring, like there was one week where you and I both randomly made beet pesto, like because the seasons came at the same time. But I think you just follow what's seasonal. Like you do that thing still where you go to the store and you say, oh, they had this thing, it looked amazing. I'm going to take it home and make it into something. And that might be Chilean or it might not be Chilean, and that's. Oh, someone wants to know what are our favorite Chilean wines to try when trying out your recipes? Ooh, that's a hard one. I like independent wines. I'm really big into independent wines. So if you can go, like, for example, if you live in DC, we're friends with the people at Gran Cata. That's an independent wine shop and they carry a lot of Chilean wines and also Argentine wines, but we don't hold that against them. So I'm really into like small producers of wines, but really, I mean, it's really hard to go wrong with Chilean wines. Like they're very good. So I don't know if you want to answer a specific thing, if you have another wine store you want to plug or place to buy wines.
I will say with Chilean wine, like go with Carmenere because Carmenere is really easy to drink and most of it goes well. It's kind of a mild, fruity wine that it goes well with all or mild food. So you could do a Carmenere and that's a fun story and there is a huge like what it happened with the Carmener is that it was a kind of grape that everyone thought it had disappeared, but it was rediscovered in Chile. And what it happened, because in France, there was a huge pest and it kills all the grapes. So in Chile, we are such an isolated country that the pest never arrived. And this was in the 1800s or the beginning of the 1900s, so long time ago. But anyway, in 1983 or 86, it was rediscovered in Chile, the grape. And they were treating that grape as a Merlot, so they were really not getting it like the right flavor, or the process was not the right one for the grapes. And now these last 40 years, they have been really a big push to treat that grape how it deserves. So that's a fun thing to do. And I with Eileen, probably experiment, try different, and try to buy local and small. There have been some articles. Right now it's difficult to get some stuff, but now in the US you can find pipeño, and I think that is really fun because it's a fruity, light, and a little effervescent wine. So if you find that, but I have not been able to find it. So, and Houston is pretty big and we get everything. So I think that right now is kind of difficult.
And if you want to drink something while you're cooking, it wouldn't be bad to have a pisco sour, because that's a traditional pre-meal to kind of open the appetite. So some people, you might catch them drinking a pisco sour while they are cooking. And that brings me to, would you do a live cooking demonstration, Pilar?
That's a question, or is your question?
No, it's not my question. I didn't even plant the question. I do know the person that asked it, but it was not me. I watched it for 10 days. I don't need any instructions.
So, yeah, my problem is that I cannot cook and talk. So I will need to have a companion to
I have a great idea. I know who never shuts up. I will talk.
Maybe it's coming.
Sold. One of your kids has to give up their bedroom again. What is the hardest Chilean ingredient to find in the United States?
So there is some ingredients, and we talk about it a little in the book, that you don't find in the United States, let's be honest. And a lot of the indigenous, there is a bunch of it. But from the common ones that we use, lucuma is complicated, and it's something that we really eat a lot in Chile, chirimoya. So these are two fruits that they don't travel well. So we don't see them in the United States really. You can find lucuma powder, but it's tricky. So I will need, you really need to learn how to use it. The flavor is the same, but it tends to deposit. It doesn't integrate well in many mixtures. So it's tricky to use. What else? So the squash is a big problem because it's not the same squash, but nowadays in the farmers market, you can find the hubar or the turban, all these heirloom squashes that are a lot more similar to Chilean squash, because what is easily found, like the acorn is too hard and the butternut squash is too sweet if you compare to Chilean squash. So what I do in the book, usually I mix a pumpkin from the can with butternut squash, and that gives you a rounded flavor that is quite similar to Chilean squash.
What else? For those of you who don't know, the Chilean squash is about this big. It comes like this, and when you go to the market, they saw off a little chunk of it for you, and it's actually the smell that when I went the first year that I was living in Chile, I went away for the summer, and when I came back, that was the first smell. Santiago doesn't smell very much in the summer because it's very dry here. but that was the first like vegetal smell that I smelled. And I thought, oh, I'm back in Chile because I smell that squash. It's super important. Other things, I think like the beans are not exactly the same. You had like, we had like a kind of, not a crisis of beans, but like there was like the question of how do we explain to people that they need to have beans? Because in the US, people usually use canned beans. In Chile, now we get them in Tetra Paks, but it's pretty unusual. Most people still cook them from scratch. And so when you get beans in a can, they're quite salty and they tend to be a little on the mushy side. And so that's not really how beans are served in Chile. So that was one thing we had to look at. Someone wants to know what brought me to Chile. Well, read the book. Kind of happenstance, like it just sort of happened this way. I did not intend to come for 16 years and I never imagined writing this cookbook, but you know, I hope that you will see it like we do, which is that it is our love letter to Chile. Like it's written with so much affection and so much love. And it's been a really beautiful experience to work together with Pilar to write something that that Chileans feel like for me, to write something that Chileans feel reflected in, like Chileans that I know that have read it, who are few because it's not available in Chile yet, really. They have said that they, you know, they identify with it and they feel connected to it. And that's been really, really amazing. Pilar?
So we're almost done, people. Thank you. And we're gonna go back with our friends from Book Larder. But yeah, of course, when I was saying what I cannot find is what I cannot find in Houston, because I was reading on the chat and the United States is so big. And yeah, chirimoyas are easy to find in California, but here in Houston, I have bought them and they're like so disappointing and very expensive, like $8 each. And I'm like, oh. So yeah, it varies what you're gonna find because the country is so big. And here, for example, if you live in the Pacific coast, you have almost the same flavors for the fish. Here I live in Houston, we have the Gulf. The fish is very different. You need to learn how to appreciate it because the flavors are very different. It's good, but there are different flavors. So.
Yeah, and also when we were working on the recipes, like we did things to make the recipes. We took Chilean versions of foods and thought, so one of the things that we had to do that was actually complicated and that maybe we didn't know about was we had to make sure that we didn't kind of overlap things too much. Like, oh, let's not make another dish that has something that gringos are gonna think, that Americans are gonna think is too similar to something else, but also let's not try to make them cook with things that to them are really just not eaten. Like in Chile, we eat the bottom of the artichoke. That's like a thing that you eat, not the heart, just the bottom. And yes, you can get them in the United States, but that's not common. And the same dish, which in this case, it's the pascualina de espinaca, the spinach, the double-layered, double-crusted spinach pie, we did it with spinach, which is also done in Chile, because why make someone go and buy artichoke bottoms if that's not something that's common for them when they're going to like the spinach one just as much? And it's not difficult, and it's not like an off-spec replacement. It's completely in line with how Chileans eat. I don't know if there's any other questions. I think Magda, if you wanted to come back in and show us out, that would be okay. Oh, here she is now.
Eileen and Pilar, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was such a treat to sort of hear the two of you talk more in depth about the process of writing the book, and I'm just really hungry now, thinking about all the tasty dishes that are in the book. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone who attended tonight. We're glad that you were able to join us. We have our book again here, The Chilean Kitchen, available online on our website at booklarder.com. We're also open for appointments if you're local. Swing by and feel free to flip through the book. Like Pilar mentioned, we do have some signed copies still. Some signed book plates, which is kind of special. I don't know if any other places, it doesn't sound like a lot of any other places have signed books, so that's kind of unique to us, and we're just really excited about that. But thank you again for joining us. This talk will be on our YouTube channel after the event within 48 hours. So if you're looking to share tonight's event with someone who wasn't able to attend, do keep a lookout on our YouTube page. Other than that, thank you. I'll see you all later on the flip side. Thank you for joining us tonight, and take care. Be well.
Thanks again so much, and thanks to Book Larder and to everyone for coming. It was great. I'm sorry we couldn't see you, but it was nice that you could see us.
Someday soon, hopefully. All right, good night, everybody. Take care.
Night, bye.
Bye.